This film was created to examine the rhetoric and discourse surrounding security that has been used by government officials in America's current war in Iraq and past conflicts in Afghanistan. This discourse has been used by government officials not only with the hope of expanding America's economy, but with further intentions of gaining public support towards wartime legislation. Initially, we will look to establish a current scholarly definition of security.
The word security has many different levels of meaning.
We stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Security does not only mean security from terrorist attacks. In my mind, security is something much broader. So it has to do with social security, it has to do with healthcare, it has to do with, well, with feeling well in the country that you live in.
People who concern themselves with security are typically worried about sudden external threats. And so the big thing, of course, people are worried about is terrorism these days, especially Islamic terrorism.
Security is what we want, and when we have it, we don't want it so much anymore. Security is being able to go to sleep at night, figuring you'll sleep through the night without somebody busting in your door. That's a form of security, and when we have it, we sometimes get a little bored, so we go out and watch The Sopranos, because those are people who don't get to sleep.
Now, how often are we Americans threatened by terrorism? Or is this just another ploy by President Bush's administration and his use of securities discourse?
That attack on the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon really was used, I think, by the government to create this sort of endless willingness on the part of the American public.
The administration has used this as an excuse to implement ridiculous policies that they wanted to implement anyway. This is not the best way to respond to what was a truly horrifying terrorist attack.
I think security has become a national obsession, the creation of the Office of Homeland Security. The word homeland was never really part of the discourse of the United States prior to that time. To me, it has a fascist ring to it. It reminds me of Hitler and the fatherland.
I think that the best way to understand why this happened is not only to look at what kind of security was missing, what kind of security would have prevented, for example, the boarding of the terrorists on the airports, but to look at the reasons why this happened. And the broader reasons why this happened is, of course, the imperial policy of the U.S. outside. That is the foreign policy in the Middle East.
Since 9/11, have Americans changed their views on national security?
I mean, it is a very interesting question. Are most Americans more security conscious? When we go to an airport, we are. Certainly, we go through a lot of hassle there that we wouldn't have before. But beyond that, it's a good question. Is there anything we're doing now that really is different from before 9/11? I would say for 9/10 of Americans, the answer would have to be no.
But the basic pattern that the national security state uses to implement policy, make people afraid of some external threat, and use that to clamp down on everything, has not changed.
How have these government officials influenced your own sense of national security?
If everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone loved and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, then we'd see the day.
We predicate a great deal on security, but can you prove that security exists as a result of what people are doing, or is sometimes security just the result of there is no threat, and there's a political argument about whether there is a threat to this country coming from Iraq because of 9/11.
By making us afraid, is the Bush administration coercing us to spend money and forfeit certain rights?
Because then you're watching television, you're watching the news, you're being pumped full of fear. There's floods, there's AIDS, there's murder, cut to commercial. buy the Acura, buy the Colgate. If you have bad breath, they're not going to talk to you. If you got pimples, the girl's not going to fuck you. And it's just it's a campaign of fear and consumption. And that's what I think that it's all based on, is the whole idea that keep everyone afraid and they'll consume.
Globalization has had a tremendous effect on the international security structure of the 21st century. If we think about globalization as a political project, it certainly is an economic and political and transformation. And so we can think, once again, about winners and losers.
The Bush administration has consistently, over a period of many years, whittled away at our constitutional securities for freedom, for democratic government. And as such, probably the biggest single source of insecurity in the United States is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and their friends.
Governments were interested in having an enemy, and in order to put more money into armaments, in principle, into a military industry.
But the more insecure you feel, the more barriers you want to put up, and the more protection you want, and the more freedom you're willing to give up in order to have that kind of security.
Is the war and all the foreign imperialism worth the sacrifice of American lives and American freedoms?
The faith in the leader is going to shrink too, because I think fewer and fewer people are seeing 3,720 people having died for...
1 billion people died on the news tonight, but not so many cried at the terrible sight. Well, Mama said, it's just make-believe. You can't believe everything you see. So baby, close your eyes to the lullabies on the news tonight. Who's the one?
One of the things we have not done in Iraq, certainly, is create security for the people of Iraq. I think they still have less than 12 hours a day of electricity. One of the things that we depend on for security is the lights go on.
The diegetic world is so unclear, so baby, close your ears on the news tonight. On the news tonight.
What needs to change in order for us, Americans, to have a more positive impact on the global society?
What everybody wants is security, and the insurgents, in order to prove that they're winning, undermine security. And I don't see how it's possible to stop the threat against security to the Iraqi and Afghanistani people without trying to deal with the sectarian tensions that underlie it.
I don't believe that a homeland security can ever prevent somebody from blowing himself up in a metro or in a bus or in a plane. In order to prevent such measures, one would have to look at the broader picture and change the U.S. policy abroad. That is, to give people the impression that the U.S. is really working towards democracy, for example, in Iraq.
As long as the Bush administration or any government institution has the capacity to use and manipulate the discourse surrounding security to accomplish a greater agenda, Americans will constantly be impacted by fear, and the government will continue to use foreign policies that benefit the American economy but are detrimental to the global society.
We want freedom of speech, but we all talking at the same time. We say we want peace, but nobody wants to change their own mind. No, they don't. So it goes on and on and on and on and on for 1,000 years, 1,000 1,000 years, I say.